All right. It's 12 o'clock, so I think we're going to get this conference started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bill McDowell. I'm COO at Accelerant Research. We are happy to be hosting a set of pretty fantastic webinar presentations today. This is our Accelerant Research Virtual Insights Conference, the April installment. If you've joined us for conferences in the past, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, thanks. Welcome, glad to have you. I'm going to go through a really quick spiel and then hand off to Marcus and team from UGA. I am going to be essentially playing the role of the dude who stands at the podium during the in-person conference while everybody's filing in with, danishes and coffee, giving some quick housekeeping and overview information. So I won't bore you for too long, but just a couple of quickies. I'm going to give you our ground rules that we have been operating by. If you've joined us for any of these in the past, these are not going to be foreign to you at all. I think we've all been doing our fair share of Zoom meeting and webinars virtually, so you know the drill at this point, I'm sure. But we like to remind folks, here we are, we're at the mercy of tech. If audio goes out, if we have any issues or snafus, we've still got presenters who are primarily working remotely, so bandwidth can sometimes get a little funky for folks at home. So be patient, be forgiving. I will mention that Accelerant is a research company, not an event planning or conference organization. So, the conference that you're attending will have a little bit less polished than maybe some others. What we do bring to the table is, some really good content, some great speakers, and, the opportunity to sit back and hear some research experts talk a little shop, which is great. So, I have the second point here, which is be respectful. It's never something that we have an issue with, but just a reminder that, even though this is remote, let's avoid the trolling. Let's, make sure that we are respectful of our presenters. That doesn't mean that you can't, challenge and ask questions. Everybody's a researcher. We're certainly used to having to defend the results that we produce. So, compelling conversation, compelling questions are great. We certainly encourage that. And to the extent possible, I know this is a virtual conference. We're not in person. You can't raise your hand and ask questions. Well, let's try our best to network, to engage with one another virtually. So we've got a lot of different spokes in this webinar. We've got folks who are accessing on Zoom. We've got LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We're going to do our best to monitor chatter on each. If you have questions, certainly pose them, comments, whatever, either for the presenters themselves or other attendees. To the extent possible, try to treat it, like an in-person conference. Shake hands, introduce yourselves, say hi to one another. Apologies for what I think was a scheduling snafu. I think some of you may have gotten an invitation for this starting at 11 a.m. Eastern. Actually, start time was obviously, here we are at noon. So sorry about that. I will mention, I know we've got a lot of CX folks that are in attendance. So I'll mention that, just to keep everyone satisfied, we are offering, full money back on your registration fee, which was nothing because it's a free conference. So a little joke there. And that's it. I'm going to give you very quick just rundown of, we've got our first speaker. Our speakers are going to be from University of Georgia. We've got Marcus Cunha, who's going to be sort of leading the show, but very excited about the fact that we also have some of his students presenting as well, which is really cool, I think. Just going to give you a real quick rundown of the remaining schedule for the day, and then we'll loop back, hand off to Marcus and team, and let this bad boy get going. So at 1 p.m., we're going to have Molly Malsom from Schwab, who's going to be talking about preference testing in user experience research, to do or not to do. We've got our 2 p.m., which is going to be Mandy Drew from Capital One. And then batting cleanup is going to be Josh DeFreets from Walgreens, talking about design research and the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. So a lot of good content today. Very excited about it. Like I said, first off is going to be Marcus and the gang from UGA. Marcus is going to be joined by 4 of his students. We've got Adam Clements, we've got Luke Miltner. Luke is also, in addition to MMR candidate, he's also an incoming research associate at KSNR. Reed Riley, who is also an inbound senior research analyst at Ipsos, as well as Zoe Zierlin, who is going to be incoming quantitative strategist at Egg Strategy. So, you know, this is great. I love the fact that we've got some students presenting. You know, I think based on these credentials, we've got, you know, our industry is in good hands. So very excited about this. I think that's it for me. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to come back at the end of the presentation, handle some Q&A, but Marcus and team can certainly feel free to field any questions as they come up. But yeah, Marcus, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm going to stop sharing and let you roll with it.
Thank you, Bill. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bill, for inviting me back. I was in one of the first installments of this at the beginning of the pandemic when I presented on behavioral economics and consumers insight and research. So I'm glad that we are also headed towards the end of the pandemic, and that Bill continues to do just a great service to the industry. So last time I did all the heavy lifting. This time I have the students to do the heavy lifting. So I'm just going to stand here for a few minutes and look pretty and tell you a little bit about our program. Some of you might not be as familiar. So the Master of Marketing Research program at UGA at the Dietary College of Business, it is the first and most recognized program in the research and insights industry. It was created because of a need of the industry, the need to support data-driven decisions and analyze growing amounts of data available from retail scanners. According to the 2017 Grid Report, our MMR program is recalled 3 times as often as all the other MMR programs combined. It was founded in 1979, so we're in a midlife crisis, hopefully not. But in the first class, graduated in 1981. So which means this graduating class that's going to be graduating in a couple of weeks is going to be our 41st class. When they graduate, we're going to have 730 alums of the program who are thought leaders in the industry. So our MMR students are trained in both methodological and consulting skills. So they learn conjoint analysis, they learn regression models, they learn multivariate skills, but they also learn how to present data visualization, presentation skills, storytelling, and so on. So they have access to state-of-the-art software and hardware that the program provides. We're actually presenting from our dedicated state-of-the-art lab. Our students are highly sought after by companies recruiting sites and research talent. So we have a standing 100% placement rate. So whether you're looking to recruit top talent or further your research education, or if you know somebody who wants to enter the industry, please contact us by contacting me directly using the email or contacting our program. And with that, I would like to introduce our team.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. We're all vaccinated. So so I'm going to start us off. My name's Reed Riley. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I did my undergrad at Clemson University. While at Clemson, I was able to partake in a research study under 2 professors with some other students, and it was for Siemens Corporation out of their Atlanta office. It was year-long, and we did qualitative research looking at generational differences with their mass retirement that they're finding, that they're having. And so that really gave me a love for research. I wanted to pursue it as a career, which led me to the MMR program. This past year has been awesome. I really feel like we've really honed in on skills, and it's really prepared us to have this career as researchers in the industry. And I have to plug it again. The professors have been awesome. They've made it a very memorable year with the unknown and challenges of COVID. And so it's been great.
I'm Zoe Zerlin. I'm originally from Chicago. I did my undergraduate degree at Florida State in advertising and statistics. Florida State University has an incredible undergraduate research program. I was able to conduct an honors thesis. It was a quantitative content analysis of Nazi propaganda from 1933 to 1938. So I'm really thankful that I've been able to kind of flourish in my research career here. Professors have been incredible, and yeah, really thankful.
Awesome. I'm Luke Miltner. I've since gotten a large haircut since that picture on the slide. I'm what they fondly refer to as a double dog. I went to UGA for undergrad, studied digital marketing, got a certificate in entrepreneurship. And I kind of stumbled my way into the research scene pretty late in college. I thought I wanted to do nonprofit work for a long time. I have a huge heart for that kind of smaller business. And I love that about entrepreneurship as well. So very, I guess, goal-oriented person. I like serving and giving back. And I feel like I have an impact to do that in the research industry. And I really love the program here at UGA.
And finally, hi, I'm Adam Clements. I'm a native of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I graduated from Northern Kentucky University. I really found my love for research in my final years at Northern Kentucky. I did a majorly secondary research project, but we did some cool stuff on the back end too. And I actually got to fly out to Denver and present to the whole marketing squad. And that really signaled to me that this was what I wanted to do with my life going forward. And I ended up finding the UGA program on a lark and have loved it the entire way through. It's been one of the best decisions of my life.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, Adam and I are going to step out for the first part.
And I'm 5'9", so they're just very, very tall.
so we're really thankful to be here and that you're taking the time out of your days to listen to our findings. So we're going to jump straight into our presentation. So to start off, we had a research question. It was inspired by our MMR alum who was wondering whether the direction, orientation of rating scales influence respondents. And so as a team, we created this overarching research question, which you can see in the red, is would scale points being presented in ascending versus descending order or vertically versus horizontally affect respondents' ratings? And so as a team, we designed an experiment to answer this question. It did include a Mark II type attention check as the MMR, as we hypothesized that attention paid to the experiment might influence ratings as a function of how scales were presented. So a little bit about our experimental design. The respondents were presented with an experiment which asked them to rate items on well-established psychological scales. They were measuring impulsiveness and dietary control. We pulled these scales from the marketing handbook of scales, so they have already been tested on validity and reliability, which allowed us to take average score on each scale and use that as our dependent variable in the analysis. Regarding how we were going to measure this, we were looking to see whether differences in the structure of a scale affect the ratings. So we manipulated the two independent variables, which one is the direction of the scale labels, that ascending versus descending, and then two, the scale orientation, which was the vertical versus horizontal. So this resulted in us having 4 experimental conditions: that ascending vertical, ascending horizontal, descending vertical, and descending horizontal. So we designed the survey in Qualtrics, and we utilized Protégé MMR panel for fielding the research. The respondents were randomly assigned to one of the 4 conditions and then were presented with both the impulsive and dietary control scales in random order. So note there was 2 randomizations occurring, and this resulted in 762 respondents that participated. So a little bit of what respondents were seeing. These are the scales that we pulled from that handbook. So on the left, you can see, let's see if it's control, right? Oh no, is it control? No. Sorry, we were trying to do a pointer.
Yeah, but that's okay.
So on the left, you can see the impulse buying tendency scale. These statements were asking how often they spend more than they can afford. Do they like to indulge, self-control? Do they seldom plan? And it's a 7-point scale with strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. And then on the right, you see our dietary control scale. And this was 9 statements talking about, do They do small helpings to control weight. Do they skip meals, calorie count, eat diet foods? And this was a 5-point scale from never to always. And so this is what our respondents looked at in the 4 experimental conditions. As you can see, we have on the left, number 1, the ascending vertical with always being at the bottom. And then we had the descending vertical with always at the top. And then on the bottom was our horizontal ascending descending, with ascending horizontal always being on the right, and then descending horizontal always being on the left. So now I'm going to pass it off to Zoe.
Awesome. So before we conducted this research, we wanted to look at a bit of a literature review, kind of see where heads were at in the industry, if someone had, already done this research before we replicated it. So we found quite a bit of associated research by, and I apologize in advance for my pronunciations of these names, Ting Yan and Florian Koish, who are at the University of Maryland, and Liru He. So they did 2 different pieces of research, the first of which was the impact of question and scale characteristics on scale direction effects. So they found that when scales are presented in the forward order, an average of 46% of respondents chose from the first half of the scales. However, only about 43.5% of respondents chose from from that side when the scales were presented in the reversed order. So that was, they did, find a significant difference between the 2. Those halves do look a bit equal. You can see the degree of freedom is 1254. So it might have been more doable to approach significance because of the large sample size. We had a sample size of about half of that. So we wanted to see if we could replicate this research with a smaller sample size and find the same results. They also published a piece in the Public Opinion Quarterly where they noted ratings for those countries, so just the variable they were testing, are higher when the scale starts with a high number than when the scale begins with a low number. This is more of a question about anchoring, and anchoring is not something that we approached in this research, but it's important all the same to note when you're writing your questionnaire, you're writing your survey, where you anchor your questions will have a bias or will have an impact on the responses that you get. So for our experimental design, each respondent sees both dietary control and impulse buying statements. So they see both of those sets. They are randomly assigned to one of the 4 versions of the scales. And the question was, when ratings between treatment groups are compared, do respondents' ratings vary as a function of the structure of the rating scales? So the order of the items within the survey were randomized. They could have either seen dietary or compulsive first. So they were completely independent of each other. So the first test we did before we actually began the statistical significance tests was a factor analysis. So this is a confirmatory or an exploratory factor analysis. We wanted to ensure that the different scale items were loading onto different factors because we did take the average of these 2 scales. So if you can see to the right of your screen, we have the diet control questions and the impulsive questions, and there's no cross-loading between those 2 factors. So we were able to confidently take the averages of those 2 scales in order to ascertain whether the scales had an impact on how people responded to the questions. We also did a Cronbach's alpha test. So we found Cronbach alpha integers of 0.8 and 0.92 for each of the scales. This is great. This means that they're highly intercorrelated within the scales. So really this is telling us that we are measuring the same things when we're measuring impulse buying and when we're measuring dietary control. So this factor analysis and the reliability statistics were really important to kind of ascertain before we got into the further research to ensure that the statistical power of our research and our objectives, kind of held up. So our top line findings, our executive summary from this experiment, attention checks and screening for straight lining can mitigate the impact that the structure of a rating scale may have on participants' ratings. So in other words, the pattern of the data varied meaningfully across those who failed versus those who passed the attention check. So if you take away one thing from this entire presentation, know that you should be doing attention checks and you should be screening for straight lining in your questionnaires and your surveys. And And if you're not doing that, then the scale of your questions might have an impact and might have a bias on the responses you're getting. So it might lessen the statistical power and the insights that you're getting from the survey. So now I'm going to pass it off to Luke and Adam, and they're going to go into more findings that support this executive summary.
Good height. All right. Thank you, guys. Hi, I'm Luke again. I'm going to be taking us through some of the findings. Gets a little tongue twisty in there, but bear with me. So before I get into the specific findings, I want to talk a little bit about how we approach the analysis. Our first step, as Reed mentioned earlier, was looking at the attention mark. We had a classic Mark II attention check where we told respondents to answer the second option. And we wanted to start by looking at those who failed the attention check to see if there was any sort of systematic bias within those respondents. So that left us with a sample size of about 80. And when we were looking at that group, we found that directionality, which is ascending versus descending, but not the scale orientation, significantly influenced the ratings for both dietary and impulsiveness scales. Now that is significant at a level of 0.001, which is pretty robust statistical significance. So when you plot the data out, this is what it looks like. It's kind of helpful to visualize. Now, because we're looking at only directionality as having statistical significance, we're going to be comparing the ascending bars to the descending bars from dietary and impulsive independently. So as you can see on the left with dietary control, those ascending bars are systematically lower than the descending. And then the same kind of pattern carries over with impulsive, where those ascending ratings average out to a mean of about 3.5 or 3.4, where the descending is much higher for impulse, around 4.6 and 4.8. We also plotted the baseline rating from attentive respondents just to kind of even emphasize that difference in ratings. Now, looking at finding number 2, we decided to move on from those who failed the attention check and just started looking at those who passed the attention check, which was a sample of about 682 respondents. And what we found here was that neither the directionality nor the scale orientation significantly affected ratings for either the dietary or the impulsiveness scales. So when you put the data out, this is what it looks like, which is exactly what we want to be seeing, right? So this was more of a sanity check than anything, because we want the scales, no matter how we're presenting them, to be producing consistent and accurate ratings. So a good level of stability across the bottom there. Now, getting into finding 3, this was perhaps our most interesting one. We continued looking at respondents who had passed the attention check, but we decided to dig in a little bit more to straight lining. So for the purpose of this experiment, we defined straight lining as respondents who had a total variance of 0 in their answers. So if somebody had responded with, say, answer number 4 on every single question and then selected 5 at the end for the last question, they probably weren't paying very good attention, but they were not categorized as a straight liner in this example. So we wanted to keep that definition nice and strict to improve our interpretability. So when we're analyzing those who passed the attention check and then straight lined, we found the same kind of pattern that we found in finding 1 with those who had failed the attention check. So the directionality, but not the orientation, significantly influenced the ratings for both dietary and impulsiveness scales. So you can see across the bottom, again, comparing ascending to descending, you have dietary control approaching significance, and then impulse spying as very significant, where the descending values are consistently higher. One more thing to note before I pass it off to Adam is that this effect seems to be a bit more pronounced with the vertical categories. As you can tell, with dietary specifically, the only real difference between ascending and descending is found in that vertical category. And then with impulse buying, you see a very large difference between an average rating of about 2 for ascending vertical, and then an average rating of about 5.1 for vertical descending.
Awesome. So to wrap this up in a nice tiny little bow, we went ahead and prepared some key takeaways for you guys. So just to reiterate a lot of what Luke was saying. So direction of rating scale labels, and that's ascending versus descending, but not scale orientation, vertical versus horizontal, influence participants' ratings when both they failed attention checks as well as straight lines. So because the effects of direction are so tangible, it's really key to ensure that you're utilizing data cleaning on the back end of your survey as much as you possibly can. And I think we have another finding here that really echoes that. Specifically, we see that in descending, the ratings within those that straight line and fail the attention check are very highly inflated when compared to basically all the other values across the board. So in addition to that, we did run a bunch of Uni and Nova tests on a bunch of demographics that we had from the survey. And realistically, we didn't see a ton of massive effects. Most of the effects were negligible across the board. We had some kind of fun ones. I think specifically, I was laughing at the fact that those with professional degrees, whether that be Juris Doctorates or medical doctorates, had massively inflated ratings within the impulsiveness scale. I have no idea why that is. Perhaps it's they have more money, so they can be more impulsive, or perhaps they're just too busy to read the survey. Regardless, we did see effects like that, as well as in diet control, we saw that Asian respondents on the descending saw inflated ratings, and on the impulsiveness scale, Black respondents saw lower ratings, again, on that descending scale. And with that, here's a list of a few of our references, and we'd like to open up the floor for Q&A.
Do you want to take this? Or?
Yeah. So this is a project that we did in the course I teach in the MMR program during the fall semester. And, you know, the idea is for this course, in addition to do several different types of analysis, including turf analysis, max-diff, crosstabs, chi-square analysis, survey design, we also work on this idea of research on research. You know, they do several readings on how to, you know, more correctly write survey questions, how to better analyze data, what's the impact of the collection method on the data. And then this was a project of what we call the research on research project. So we like to do this kind of things because, you know, we help to promote knowledge across the industry, and you help to answer questions that people in the industry might be asking themselves, but they might not have the resources and the time to answer those questions. So through our partnerships, we have partnerships with two panel companies, with AYTM and Protégé MR, and those partnerships have been instrumental for us to do this kind of project, because before these partnerships, you know, was mostly like students begging for their friends on social media to answer to their surveys. And through these partnerships, they learn a lot in terms of, you know, the trade-offs that you are facing when you are designing a survey or running an experiment. I want to ask this question this way. Well, that's going to take more time. It's going to become more expensive. Or I want to run a max diff, or I want to run a conjoint. And then because those tasks are very taxing on the respondent, and then also the price goes up. So we have some budgets that are allocated for those kind of panels. And then students tend to learn a lot about these trade-offs. I'm going to check the chat if there's questions. Was one of the scales... Was one of your scales, did you allow smartphone survey takers? And if so, how did you? So we didn't screen for the type of device that they were taking. And I don't know, do you have the data available, the type of device?
MMR is a really big platform where all, like, it's mobile, they make sure that it's like visible.
But I don't think we have a way to test whether there was a difference in the way people took the survey in terms of the device that they used to take the survey. But that's a good point. So Generally speaking, as you saw in the results, what we see, let me see here. If we go back to the main finding here, when the check to kind of question, it was something like this. We gave them a list of animals and say, of this list of animals, which one is your favorite, right? So we had like pets kind of animals. They were like dogs, birds and cats. And we also had like tiger, lion, whale. And then we said, okay, with this list of animals, which one is your favorite? And then we added, if you're truly paying attention when taking this survey, please select option 2, tiger, right? So then 80 people were not able to, did not pass that attention check. And then whether the labeling of the scale was ascending or descending, we saw that there was an effect here, where people probably assume that the scale was going in an ascending direction. Did you see it? We survey tool qualitative expose the scale vertically when people are using this on mobile device. Should I be looking at the scale order? So let me see. On my survey tool, qualitative puts the scales vertically when people are using this on. Should I be looking at the scale order by checking the people that answer on different devices? Yeah, you can do quick checks on that. You can. Depending on how many categorical variables you have like, if you want to test just smartphones versus non-smartphones, you can do a quick t-test on the scales and see if there's differences. Or if you have more than 2 options, if you have smartphone, desktop, iPad, or whatever you want to test, then you do an ANOVA, and you can quickly tell whether there is a difference. What our research is suggesting is that the extent to which people pay attention to the questions and to the scales and the order in the scale, there shouldn't be any issues with your data. Did you see any differences by number of items of scale? So the pattern pretty much replicated in both dietary and impulsive buying. One way of quickly doing this, if you guys plan to do that and you have some of your scales are 5-point and the other one 7-point, you can do a repeated measures ANOVA where the scales are levels of a factor, and then you can see whether this within subject factor or repeated measures factor interacts with the other factors, which would be the order of the scale or the kind of device that you are taking the kind of device on which you're taking the survey or the experiment. So it's not that really hard to test for that, but it's very, very easy, right? So because in this case, we had a repeated measures, people responded to both the dietary control and impulsive buying. We randomized the order that they receive each kind of scale and also the items within each kind of scales to try to prevent carryover effects from one scale to the other, because to some extent, they're measuring things that people might think they're similar, but our factor analysis, the fact that the scale items match it exactly in a single factor for each of the scale, tells us that they're actually measuring 2 different constructs. So, all this can be easily done with statistical tests. In general, the direction shouldn't matter. In fact, so this one, yeah. So on this slide here, these are the people who paid attention, right? So when people paid attention, you can see there is no difference whether the scale is horizontal or vertical, on ascending or descending. Those differences were not statistically significant. None of these differences were statistically significant. And the same pattern replicated for the impulsive buying. So when people passed the attention check, we didn't see any of this impact of the orientation of the scale or orientation of the labeling of the scale. One thing that we have here, we have a baseline. You know, the baseline that we're reporting here is the overall mean, or we call in statistics the grand mean of all these 4 cells. So the grand mean for all these 4 cells of the people who paid attention and did not have any impact in terms of the orientation of the scale, that grand mean was 2.6 overall. So this is what the rating, overall rating of somebody who was paying attention should have been. Okay, the fact that the descending scale is going above that grand mean means that descending labeling of the scale inflates the rating, the overall rating, relative to what we would have seen if people paid attention to the question and the orientation of the scale. The same result is replicated here, right? Where because the baseline on ascending, the baseline matches the ratings in those conditions, but when we go to descending, the ratings go well above the baseline. So I don't know if you have any more questions. Let's see the scales. Okay. Bill, I don't know if you have any other questions on other platforms.
Yeah, it looks like we had a couple. One was, and apologies if I missed you already responding to this, but could you describe straight lining again?
Okay, so straight lining, it is when somebody, if you have like a series of items, right? So here we had, give you an example based on the scale here, we, the scale items for the dietary control condition were set 9 scale items. People had to rate themselves using this 5-point scale for each of these 9 questions. They receive one of those questions one at a time. Now, if somebody, click on sometimes for all 9 different scale items or all 9 of the questions, we define that as straight line, right? You could add manually counting, but that's a lot of work. So what I taught the students to do is just measure the variance of these 9 scale items, right? So if the variance in that scale items, on the 9 scale items, it's equals 0, means there was no variance. Means that every answer was considered rated the same. It could be the case there is a chance that somebody really felt like that. So perhaps you can use some other measures. So for example, how long it took them to respond those questions to figure out whether this is true straight lining or not. I would expect that people who were not paying attention straight line to get through with the survey and get paid, they didn't spend a lot of time rating those scales. But if they were thoughtful, they might have spent some time, a little more time and say like, yeah, my questions, my answer for all these questions is sometimes. So there is a possibility that there is somebody who was paying attention and straight line, but did not straight line as a way to get through the survey without paying attention.
And it looks like we had another question from Rebecca asking, was there any qualitative component to this study or was it just quant?
So it was just quantitative. They do take a qualitative course at the same time they take this course. My course is more quantitative. And the reason for selecting these well-established scales is because these researchers already did the qualitative portion of the study they probably identified, I don't know, 25 or 30 items for each of those scales. And then they went through statistical procedures of validation of scale measurement. And they came up with these items that best explain the variance in the data, right? So we could skip that step because our focus was mainly to quantitatively measure if there are differences in ratings depending on how you present the scale. Is that clear?
Yes.
So the recommendation is to do the attention checks and screen for straight line and removing the response of those participants that fail both of those. Yeah, I'll say both can impact the data. One thing that we saw is that when you, just by removing the attention check, the Mark II kind of attention check, we eliminate this boost in the rating. So the trade-off that you're facing here, it is, and if you can do both, it looks like it's great. What happens here is that you're facing now a trade-off of sample size, right? So if a large number of people fail the attention check and the straight lining, what happened, like the power of your design goes down, the statistical power of your sample goes down, and you are less likely to find differences that might exist in reality in the population, but your sample does not show because of lack of power. So say if you have to remove more than 10 to 15% of your sample, depending on the size of your sample, you might be hurting your ability to identify statistical significant tests. But if you're seeing that, large percentage of people are missing your attention check and are straight lining and they're rushing through your study, it's probably time to talk to your panel and talk about the quality of the data that they're getting.
I think we're wrapping up on questions. I don't see any new ones coming in. I would just echo that last conversation. That's where the art and science comes in play, right? You've got these things at your disposal from a quality standpoint, the straight line checking, timers, asking sort of trick questions or making sure that folks are paying attention. But it is something that you have to take kind of conditionally. If you're, for example, terminating respondents based on, not passing attention checks, it's one thing if you're purchasing from a panel, from a sample provider. It's another thing entirely if, for example, you're doing like a customer sat tracking study, you're measuring the opinions of your customers, and there's that sort of CX issue potentially at play as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are other things you can do that we have seen in my course. For example, you can do like a commitment statement at the beginning of the survey. Say, I am committed to thoughtfully answer the questions in the survey. Your first option is that I'm not committed, but I'm still going to do the survey, right? And just doing that also tends to improve the quality of the data. And people are being honest that they are not going to be committed to thoughtfully answering the questions of the survey. But overall, just having this commitment question in the beginning tends to improve the quality of the data.
Okay, one last check for any questions. I think we have officially wound down. Yeah, guys, this was great. On behalf of all of the insights industry, I am feeling very good about our future when we've got folks like your presenters coming into the workforce, keeping us in check from a quality standpoint. Really outstanding job, guys. I'm this was great for me. So, any parting shots, Marcus or team?
I would say, like, almost everything can be tested, right? So, hey, if you guys have an idea of something that you want to do research on research, I'm going to be teaching this class again in the fall. I'll be willing to do that. I've done some things for some panels that say, like, panel aggregators. They say, hey, we're getting data from these 10 different panels, and we are measuring NPS for this company. We're measuring over time. How do I know which panels are reliable or not? And they sent me the data and did all the analysis. Like, here are the panels that are above, below, and here's the ones that are trending, the different trends that you're seeing over time. It's, with the right tools, statistical tools, is very easy for most of the time to test for all these kind of questions that you might have about the quality of the data, how people are responding to your surveys or your experiments.
Amen. We're gonna thank
so
you.
If you don't have any more questions, I would like to thank the opportunity. That's a great opportunity for our students. They are, transitioning into their new careers. We're graduating in 2 weeks, and probably between 15 and 30 days after that, they're going to start their careers. And so it was a great opportunity for them to be like a, new speaker kind of like conference. And so I really thank Accelerant and Bill for giving us this opportunity.
Absolutely. And, way to lead us off. We've got, seasoned career researchers who have to follow this, and I think they're nervous at this point. So,
Cool.
yeah, thanks a lot, guys. It looks like we've got about 10 or 15 minutes until the top of the hour when the next presentation kicks off. So everybody hang tight, grab a beverage, and we'll be back at the top of the hour. Marcus and team, thank you guys so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.